Great morning, world! Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast with your host, Dragon!
Great morning, world. Great midday. Always funny when I start my show on other than early morning, because it makes me recognize that I have to say something else. Because the catchphrase for the Rise Up with Dragon podcast is great morning, but sometimes we interview people and we have to say great midday, great afternoon, or in French we'd say bon après-midi. So anyway, good to see you guys. So exciting what's going on with this show and this amazing interview we just had with Jim Quick, and that one was live. And if you're listening to this live, you know that. So anyway, just awesome to be here with another amazing guest. Just really excited about what's happening, and the synchronicity of the world and what's going on, all these new people that I'm meeting. We've got some really special guests coming up, and you're in for a real treat with the Rise Up with Dragon podcast. As always, we don't have sponsors on the Rise Up with Dragon show. I should say we don't have paid sponsors because we just want to provide great content. But we are sponsored by Karma Mind, which is the fastest growing Buddhist meditation podcast rooted in the beautiful teachings of Buddha. Karma Mind, found on iTunes. That's my wife's podcast, and it's amazing, and you'll love that. So just as a quick reminder, what's unique about the Rise Up with Dragon show is we stream it live. One of the reasons why I stream it live is that I want everybody to have access to actually seeing me and the guest. We're also streaming live on YouTube, all the Facebook channels. We're recording this for the podcast as well, Rise Up with Dragon, iTunes. Please do me a favor and go there if you haven't already and subscribe. Go listen to the Jim Quick talk was loaded yesterday. But we also have Clubhouse open right now, because some people like to listen through Clubhouse. And if we have enough time and we end before the hour, which I'm going to be starting another Clubhouse room, maybe people will be able to interact and ask our guests some questions. The other reason why I like to go live is that it's very scary and uncomfortable to stream yourself live to, I think, 6 different channels. So just to be transparent about that, I love being scared. I've learned in my life to just push myself into the unknown. So I like to think that that makes this a bit of a unique situation, because we're not just hiding behind the microphone. We're out here in the open. So let me tee this up. We have another really special guest, and a lot of you have had the opportunity to meet him. You might have found him through social media or seen back in the old days live events. But how I met this individual really tees up how special this is in light of synchronicity. So let me do my best to not bastardize this story, because we don't just have anyone on this show. I love to have people that not only have great stuff to share with you, but also I like to unpack what it is that they do and make sense of them in a real conversation. That's the purpose of the show. But how I meet people is really crucial as well. So I don't know, I'm getting too old to remember years and dates. Maybe he will. But anyway, I'm at this big convention of some sort. Chiropractic was my prior career. And I'm at this convention and I'm walking through the convention hall and then down into the casino by myself, which is a little strange, to be honest with you. I don't know what I was doing there by myself, but I'm walking through, and you know what it sounds like. You're walking through a casino and you hear the slot machines and all that stuff. And I'm by myself. I'm wearing this suit because I was at this event. And I'm walking, and this is at the time in my career where I was practicing chiropractic, but I was also doing humanitarian work. I started a worldwide humanitarian organization, and it was kind of growing, and it was becoming a thing. And actually, that's why I was in Vegas. I think I was getting some sort of accolade, right? Which at the time I probably said, "Who, me? I don't deserve this." You know that story. So anyway, I'm walking through the casino floor, and I just hear, first of all, I hear a commotion, some energy, and I look over at a blackjack table. I'm pretty sure it was blackjack. And I look over, and it's just there's like a commotion going on over there. And I look further, and the commotion is all centered around this one guy. Now, I'm kind of like maybe open to gambling, but the commotion is centered around this one guy who I'm watching like just double and triple down and spend more money than his wife was okay with, right? But he was putting the money down, and every time he put the money down, he would stand up, spin around and dance, kind of like Michael Jackson, but he's Persian. So he's like a Persian Michael Jackson at the time. But he caught my attention. And I'm kind of like going through this phase of my life where I'm kind of like interested in why things happen, a little bit of the synchronicity acknowledgement. So I just said to myself, I got to go over there and see what's going on. So, and I just want everybody to be mindful. Sometimes this is how lifetime friendships that completely change your life, they're happening all over the place, but it's whether or not we notice them. So I noticed this guy, and I went over and I sat next to him. And I had no idea who he was, but I just knew I wanted to meet him. So we started talking, and I kind of joined in the fun. And I think we won like $1 and lost 1,000, something like that. But we had a great, great time. But it turns out that he was there for the same convention. So we started to develop commonalities. Yeah, I'm a chiropractor too, and all that stuff. And we just really, I guess we were just intrigued with each other. And then he learned about my humanitarian effort, which was in Dominican Republic and Haiti at the time, third world countries. And he said to me, kind of sounded a little bullshitty, right? He said to me, I'm coming on that trip. And I remember I looked at him because we exchanged information, and I said to him, I go, are you sure about that? Because if you say that, I'm going to hold you to it. And he goes, I'm coming on that trip. So I left, and 9 out of 10 people say that and they don't follow through. So we reached out to each other. Long story short, he came on the trip and served with us in this humanitarian effort. And how can I put this? I mean, we became like brothers, right? And the reason why we linked up so strong is because we were both in that phase of our lives where we were going to get it, but also struggling with so many adversities and mindsets and everything like that. So I have watched this guy. We always joke and say every time we speak, it's exhausting because, we've just been through so much together. But I've watched this guy just completely come from, I always say some people were messed up and then they become blessed up. I watched this individual come from the dark and move into the light. And, just an amazing, amazing individual. So he is a chiropractor. His name is Dr. Nima Rahmany. And what he does is he's a healing and interpersonal trauma specialist. And what he does, this is what you guys are going to love about this. He handles and helps people with relationship crisis. He's actually the creator of an amazing, amazing method. You know how I always talk about rewiring the program? If we can learn how to look at things differently and get a different perspective on things, you get your hands and you put them back on the controls. So he created something called the overview method. And what it does is it helps heal attachment wounds and trauma. So what he does is take people just like you and I mean, we could have used this overview method back in the day, so he created it from his own personal trauma. But what he does is completely rewires people's brains. And if you look him up, and we'll give you the information after, you'll see that this guy is completely transforming people. So I'm going to bring him up here. Now, I have to warn you, before he unmutes, he is in, which is really interesting in our story. Right now, he's in Whistler. He's Canadian, by the way. this individual. He's in Whistler, and we have a little bit of history in Whistler because we're both skiers, and he and I went on a fun trip there. But Dr. Nima, before you say hi, I want to tell you the one massive takeaway that I got from you, and I didn't tell you this when we were prepping for this, and it's in my book. I told you that I'm putting you in my book. Because there's a section in my book where I explain that I learned things that changed my life. And I'm sure, just there's no new information. I know you got this from somebody else, but you said it to me, just the concept of good day versus bad day and how they're always living in duality. And I heard that from you on one of our couch mastermind sessions that we used to have. And it completely changed my life because it empowered me with the ability to recognize that if I ever said I was having a good day, it was just a fantasy, just the same as if I said I was having a bad day, where I wasn't recognizing the duality of both things. So I want to give you that because you and I steal things from each other all the time. And I just want you to know that one I stole from you. So without further ado, we're going to learn a little bit about TRIGGERPROOF, and I want to get a little bit of your backstory first, but Dr. Nima, do you want to just jump in and say hi?
Thanks, Dragon, JC, Dr. JC. It's great to be here and having this conversation with you. Sorry for the noise in the background, the hotel kind of thing, but I'll mute it and make sure that we have as good, clear communication as possible. It's good to be here, bro.
So what I would love you to do, because this is a nice opportunity. He and I are so busy, we don't always get a chance to do this little jam session. So take us back a little bit and tell me a little bit about the creation of Dr. Nima. Tell us a little bit about where you come from, your childhood. How was this person, that you have become now? Where do you come from? Like, what was the driving force that has led you to become who you are now, doing the overview method and speaking in front of so many people? Because anytime I meet somebody that dedicates their entire life, and by the way, he's got a beautiful wife and a beautiful son named Dominic. I got to know where the name Dominic came from. But I always notice that when somebody's dedicated their whole life to helping people, there's a backstory. So let's hear a little bit about that so people can get to know you before we go over TRIGGERPROOF.
Totally. Well, I teach people what I needed the most. And that was how to regulate my emotions so that I could have relationships that worked. Throughout my entire life, my success hasn't been a problem for me. The biggest challenge for me was how I was showing up in relationships. And I was constantly getting myself into these similar patterns in relationships with kind of the narcissist codependent cycle. And it wasn't until I had a big wake-up call where I had to kind of go deep inside and really see, was there something kind of broken within me that couldn't create healthy relationships? Why was I getting into the same patterns? And so I realized it wasn't because I was broken at all. It was because I had attachment traumas. And unknowingly throughout my entire life as a chiropractor, as a coach, helping people with mindset and heal from their anxieties and get out of their own way, I was unknowingly, working on healing those parts of myself that were unresolved. And so now I teach people what I really need the most, and that's to help create a sense of safety within my body and a sense of security so that I'm not unknowingly seeking it outside in success, in relationships, in whatever things that we look for externally that never quite satisfy. And so the birth of the TRIGGERPROOF concept was the understanding that the holy grail of what every one of us want is to be able to create a sense of safety and emotional regulation within our body. We want to be able to have healthy relationships. We want to be able to connect to some sort of a meaning or a purpose that's beyond ourselves. And we want to have this magical thing called intimacy, which is the ability to really take off a mask and be, connected to somebody, be seen, feel heard, and have the other person feel the same way. So becoming trigger proof is a skill of self-regulation, using the nervous system to expand your capacity to handle greater and greater amounts of stress so that you can flow with your day, so that you can have secure relationships that aren't codependent, that aren't needy, that aren't dismissive, and connect to a cause and a purpose that's greater than yourself. So I teach people how to heal the attachment wounds, not just from a cognitive standpoint, but from a body-based standpoint. So essentially we could have the most important thing on the planet, which is healthy and secure relationships.
So I love what you're saying, and what I'm hearing, and we have to remember to tell the story about Whistler. But what I'm hearing is, and this is a conversation that I think you and I have had for so many years, and I'd love you to talk a little bit about this, because human beings that are struggling, right, with trauma of any sort, that's a result of them being attached to something that they think is, right? One of the things that I know that you've always excelled at is help people look at things in a different way. So one of the things that I've identified is that my mind, which, by the way, it's funny that I call it my mind, because it isn't really my mind, right? My mind has been programmed by my programmers, right? As we used to learn, mother, father, teacher, preacher, and we developed this program and these concepts that give us the ability to create perceptions: good day, bad day, suffering, happy, and all that. So speak a little bit on that topic. How do people get to this point where they actually believe that their situation is a certain way when it really isn't? You know what I mean? How do you get people to, because when you say trigger proof, what I hear is a trigger, something happens that triggers them to go to that space, right? And it's a perpetual thing. So I'd love to hear how you break that cycle, but how is it that people get so attached to trauma to the point where it becomes their reality?
Well, first thing I want to say to answer that, JC, is that I want to drop in that concept that all trauma mainly is separation. See, life becomes a series of attachment and loss. Attachment and loss. If you look at your life, it's just been one attachment and loss. I mean, you and I have been through relationship breakdowns, divorce, changing careers. It's just this experience of attachment and loss. And each time we have this experience where we become bonded and attached to someone or something, and then we feel a separation from that thing, it brings us back to the primary core wound of attachment and loss that we've experienced, which is that primal wound of the birth trauma. And James Hollis, who's a Jungian psychologist, says that life is a series of attachment and losses, beginning with the primary wound from the birth, a wound which we never fully recover from. And so essentially what happens is, without learning the skills
Can you speak,
yeah.
Explain, go a little deeper with birth trauma and how it's a wound that you never heal from.
Well, I mean, I have a 6-month-old, and I just got to experience it. When you are conceived, you are literally bathing in your nervous system is bathing in the nervous system of your mother, and how she's feeling, and the story that she's going through, whether your father was going to be there, whether he left when he found out that you were pregnant, whether you even had an invitation to exist, all of that energy before you were born, you are now a part of, right? And so you become part of your mother's ecosystem, which, when I discovered this during COVID, when my wife was pregnant, I was like, wow, my number one priority is to have my wife feeling safe. because I know that all of the stress hormones she's going through gets downloaded to my child. And so what I discovered, so what happens is we then are now, we become attached to our, life force energy through our mother. And then one day, boom, you're born and you become detached from that. And it's traumatic. This is our first primary trauma. And this detachment from the wound is this separation, our first real experience. Often, sometimes it happens, unfortunately, when we're in utero, but this is our first trauma through birth. And from birth onward, we go through many of these separation traumas. And what they do is they accumulate, JC, in our body. And we don't know that they're there, but based on the presence of mom and dad and the way that they were tending to our needs emotionally and physically, the way that they were emotionally available to us, the way that they were responsive to our needs, unconsciously, what it does is that it leaves a imprint on our nervous system that this is what love is. So if you had a mother that wasn't consistent in her emotional attunement and care for you, you might then have the experience that you were detached from love, and or maybe she was an alcoholic, or there was some sort of a challenge with your mother's ability to attune to you. So you then have this feeling of angst because of that separation from mother's attunement. So you will adapt from these experiences and become hyper vigilant and hyper focused on fixing, rescuing, solving, and creating an identity of being the good little girl or performing so that you can have mother's love and affection. And this is one example of an attachment wound that then gets kind of carried forward and unconsciously impacts our health. And as a chiropractor, we would see this classic example is somebody who comes in with fibromyalgia. Now I would see this again and again with chronic pain, chronic illness. If we trace it back to the attachment wound, classic case of mother not being all there emotionally, maybe an alcoholic, maybe going through depression or mental health problems. And so as a child, in order for you for that child to feel safe, they would have to abandon their own emotional needs and really become hyper-focused and hyper-vigilant on taking care of the needs of mom and dad, and so that they can feel safe. And now, unconsciously, have birthed this new identity of becoming a rescuer, of becoming a pleaser, a rescuer, a fixer. This core wound of not having their needs met creates this compensatory winning formula or compensatory kind of coping mechanism where you have to please all the time. Well, guess what? You're going to go into relationships as a teen, becoming the pleaser, not being able to say no, then going into relationships in your 20s, 30s, getting married, not being able to say no, saying yes, 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 pleasing, 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 pleasing. Then all of a sudden, the little child inside of you or your physiology then breaks down and you can't move and you're paralyzed. And now your body finally says, enough. You are now going to take care of me. And so these attachment wounds unconsciously drive our behavior and get triggered in certain relationship events because we tend to replicate those unresolved attachment traumas and wounds as a child. So I created a methodology when these were happening in my practice with these chronic pains, chronic illnesses, digestive issues, hormonal issues, these chronic systemic challenges were all, if we could just keep going upstream, were because the person couldn't differentiate their own needs from other people and eclipsed and abandoned themselves in service of approval of others and lost their health. And so the journey back towards healing goes back and rescuing that little girl who had to take care of her mother when she was 5 years old because she was drunk. And by turning our rescue efforts inward, our efforts to try to get external approval inward, we then heal those primary wounds and health challenges resolve, relationship challenges resolve because you can speak your truth and ask for what you need and start to feel worthy of receiving. your relationship with money changes. So essentially what I discovered is the holy grail is that your relationship with money, your body, other people, all begin with these unresolved relationship, relationship breakdowns and misattunements and conflicts that are unresolved all the way back from childhood. So it's a beautiful journey to go inward and piece all of those together and use your triggers as a kind of a portal to go back and find those younger parts of ourselves that need our attention.
With a little bit of my twisted humor, I'm just going to call my mom and say it's your fault, or maybe it's the doctor that cut the cord. Everything is their fault. What's super cool, and I just want everybody to grab onto this. There's always these little nuggets that come in that I know you've never heard before. Did anybody ever look at, because if you look at the birthing process as traumatic, you're thinking you had a traumatic birth. The cord was wrapped around your neck, or they used forceps. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is so powerful, because you spend that incubation period not only connected with a cord, but neurally connected, just unbelievable to even look
energetically, yeah, too.
Energetically, and all pregnant women out there, they're gonna hear this and tell their husband, like, you better take good care of me. But the idea of that first trauma being the separation from it is so powerful. One of the things, and what's interesting as chiropractors, this just debunks the whole "what's the cause of disease" thing, right? Because the doctor of the future is going way further back. It's the cause of disease is not just structure, it's not just chemical, physical, and emotional stress. It goes way back. And what's interesting, and I don't know if you and I have ever shared this, because this would have been something during our friendship I would have pretended didn't happen. But now now that the dragon is alive, I speak openly about a lot of my stuff, and through learning, your methods, I've actually you enjoy going back when you're not afraid of going back, because you realize going back is actually part of the healing. When I was 11 years old, right? Can you give me a little violin while I talk? When I was 11 years old, I walked in that day, and this is not even the detachment from the womb. This is another thing that happened, and I want you to speak about that, because things happen along the way, right? I walked in on my 11th birthday to find out that my parents were getting divorced. Wah, wah. And all I did as an 11-year-old is I just said, "Hey, can I go play with my friends?" And I went away, and it didn't come to me until I realized that every time my birthday came up, I pretended it wasn't happening. I didn't want any gifts. I felt guilt. And what did I do when it was somebody else's birthday? Oh my God, it was like an Indian wedding. You know what I'm saying? I just did everything. So what I later learned, and I read a great book, I don't know if you ever read, it's called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, about hidden barriers. So I learned that I had a massive upper limit caused by abandonment, so that's another form of detachment. So at some point, maybe we'll have a couch talk on that, but talk a little bit. So I want to make sure that we get the trigger proof idea, because what I love about that is, it's like the idea of becoming unfuckwithable in life. I think that's everybody's goal. The true way you measure health is not how thin you are and how vital you feel. It's how you handle adversity and triggers. So I want to hear about that, but speak a little bit about how susceptible we are to be programmed by the happenings that happen in life. Like, for instance, when I was 11, and I know that you've had some of those things happen to yourself, so I love to look at it and say, it's not my fault. Not blame anybody, but it's not my fault, but it's something that I need to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Since the time that you're a child, every single experience you go through, your nervous system takes it on. And sometimes the traumas that we go through, for example, your 11-year-old example is perfect, because now you're wondering every year, why is it that I act out during my birthday? And so this is one example, is yearly Christmases. We see this a lot with our clients. They'll trauma during family holidays and all of that stuff. The main issue here, I'll tell you right now, and I figured it out, and it wasn't long ago that I figured out, that's why I'm so dedicated to teaching people about this, is that when we're children, we understand that we cannot survive without our caregivers. So in a moment when you as a child express your emotions, your feelings, your desires, your values, and when you share what they are, and your caregivers, who oftentimes are unconscious, will invalidate them, tell you it didn't happen, what you want isn't valid, shut up, don't cry, I'll give you a reason to cry. And you're told these, and you're given this type of parenting, this unconscious parenting. A child has to make a decision in that moment. Do I choose my authentic expression, or do I choose attachment to my primary caregiver? So from a young age, we are conditioned to have to choose between authenticity, being our authentic self, expressing who we are, expressing what our desires are, or if we've had experiences, expressing our feelings, desires, big emotions, and then getting hurt because of it, getting invalidated because of it, having love being pulled away because of that. What ends up happening is we're going to then adopt, our soul will become fractured. We will have our first separation trauma from our soul. This is where we detach, our soul leaves our body, and we start adopting these characters and these personas and personalities to get our needs met. Well, my truth doesn't meet my needs.
Let me grab onto that. So when you're adapting those, this is so cool, man. You know, what I love about Nima is, like, he's a really good friend of mine, and we probably don't spend enough time learning about what we both do, but I'm hearing him talk right now, and everybody that's listening is saying, he's speaking to me. But the idea of these personas and these characters that we create, what we're doing is we're protecting ourselves. And
it's a survival mechanism. It's okay. So if I all of a sudden have the experience as a child where I didn't feel seen and heard or validated because of parents that were unconscious and using their children to get their own egoic needs met, kind of like, this is a doll. I have this doll, and this child I'm going to have to meet my needs. Well, a child doesn't give a fuck about what the parents' needs are. A child has their own needs. But if a parent has a child for a specific reason, because they, because of whatever motive that we, most of us don't know the motives behind why our parents had us. But what happens is, now, unless we fit into their mold and their box, we're invalidated, whether it's religion, whether it's the choice of career. For me, it was like, you want to be a chiropractor, why aren't you being a real doctor? And so inside, what happens is, as children, we have this experience of being invalidated for the truth of who we are. And that is a form of trauma, and it's a separation from self. So what'll happen is, I will adapt to that by adopting personas that say, okay, so who do I need to be in order to get my needs met? And we unconsciously realize that who we are won't get our needs met, our needs of emotional attachment. So we have to adopt the good girl, these personas, the golden child, the pleaser, and help, and be the good boy or the good girl, so that we can be good. And unconsciously, we are separating. Our soul leaves our body, and we start adopting these personas. So we have this wound, this need, this unmet need, and then on the other side of our persona, our psyche, we then create this this coping mechanism that says, well, if I can't get my needs met this way, then I'm going to be like a ultra achiever. In my case, I'm going to be amazing at getting 10 people's attention. I'm going to do rap songs. I'm going to be very entertaining. I'm going to have everybody look at me unconsciously because because I have been so not seen and not heard. And so we adopt these personas, and then we get into relationships, and we don't know who we are. We basically adopt who it is that we have to be in order to get that connection. And within about 6 months to a year, when the anxiety of when we've already attached, the other side shows up. And all of a sudden we show up in these relationships and we feel duped because the other person's doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing. We've completely baited and switched that person. And this is the anatomy of toxic relationships. The inability to differentiate my own emotions from another person's emotions and adopt theirs and please and become the character that I think that they would want me to be to avoid the paralyzing impact of abandonment. These are the personas that we get into relationships with and we get married into. You did it. I did it. And then after a few years, you're like, what the fuck did I just do? I don't even know who I am. I've been pleasing all of my life. I've been putting on this character in this show to get admiration and to have people love me, as you and I love to talk about. And then that leaves me empty going, who the fuck is me in the first place? And so this is when you enter 30s, mid 30s, 35, 40, maybe a divorce, or maybe your second, maybe your third divorce. Some of the people who reach out, I've been divorced 3 times. In other words, they haven't got the message the first time of really discovering the truth of who I was before I separated from my soul 100 times to become whatever characters I needed to be in order to feel love, in order to feel worthy of love. And our triggers are little windows to finding those fragmented parts. If you're willing to learn the skill of mastering your triggers and taking conflict and turning it into deeper intimacy. And so I had to go through a divorce and 9 failed relationships in order to realize all of the parts of myself that I had fractured and fragmented from, and went on the path of creating a tool that helped me integrate all of those wounded parts of myself, all of these personas and multiple personalities that we walk around with all of these masks, and learn how to take them off and learn how to integrate that and to be congruent and to be authentic. And now I have the most secure relationship that I've ever had. I have a beautiful son and a tribe of self-healers that are learning these tools to transform the relationships around them by first going inward and looking at the triggers, their meanings and their origins, and resourcing them internally.
You know, I want to share just one of the things that I love to do, because it really helps me, is I love to tell my truth. You know, one of the things, actually, Nima and I are talking about starting a Clubhouse room called Truth Bomb, because it gets us in trouble often, but he and I just like overextendingly tell the truth, like to the point where I, just to highlight some of the things that he just said, I was sometimes when I introduce myself in front of stages, big stages now, I say, hi, my name is JC Dornick. I'm a recovering bullshit artist. I've been clean for 13 years. And it's true. Everybody laughs, but it's true, because I remember a time where I was a failure in life and I didn't love myself. And just like he said, I created this persona that I was a public speaker. And he and I used to joke about it because we knew we were doing it, but we were in the process, in the hard part. We were in the muck of trying to heal. And he's coming up with this method, which, like I said before, a little late on the method. I would have suffered less. But I remember, and I actually called you one time, because we went through a phase where the stages were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I remember, for the first time in my life, first time ever, I experienced a panic attack and anxiety. And he and I were in communication back then, to the point where I was just about ready to go out on stage and be a con artist, right? And let everybody think that I was this shining light of hope for everybody. But the truth is I was doing that to protect my truth. So I experienced that lack of confidence and that anxiety. And I know a lot of people come to you for anxiety. And we had a conversation about that. And although it was tough, it was the beginning of the healing for me, to the point where, first of all, I admitted that I struggle with it. And I still struggle with public speaking, ironically, because I'm a public speaker. But, it's just interesting how at some point that persona, that version of you that you're using to protect and distract yourself, it's gonna rear up at some point, and it might show up in some sort of trauma or divorce or whatever, which I now have learned is a good thing, because that's a starting point. So, I just as a friend, we used to talk to each other and joke a lot, but we were going through some real BS back then, but it's led us here, hasn't it?
Well, I always say, great story, but I always say that anxiety is actually a distraction from a lie. It's not a disorder at all. It's your soul. There's a wounded part of your soul calling to you, wanting your congruence. And so perfect illustration right there. And so essentially what I discovered is that if we don't learn how to manage our own anxiety, which is essentially a fracture from the self, a wounded younger part asking for your attention, begging for your congruence, begging for your attention. Without learning how to manage that, we then spill over into relationship situations. And because essentially the biggest kind of foundation of anxiety is a self-abandonment. You're abandoning the true self. And so anxiety is a gift to wake us up to actually start telling the truth to ourselves, because it's not that we're lying on purpose. It's that there are parts of ourselves that we feel are so unlovable, are so unworthy, that we must cover them up. Because if I take off my mask, and speaking of masks, how do you like mine right here? This is a good one. They make us, So if I take off my mask and show you the truth of who I am, then there's no way that you're going to love me. So in order for me to make sure that I have a bond towards you, I have to wear this mask and then be around you with a mask. Well, guess what? Your soul, that's not cool for your soul. Your soul is like, JC, Nima, quit your bullshitting, please. And to the degree that you're lying is the degree of anxiety that you're going to have. And so anxiety is merely a distraction from a lie. And essentially when people come in relationship limbo, should I stay? Should I go? I'm like, all right, let's pretend your partner doesn't exist. Let's just go inside and heal the cause of that alarm. So take the word anxiety, cross it out, and change that for alarm. Let's work on healing the alarm that's in the background, buzzing away, that's in your body, and it's not even on a conscious level, but that's how you're acting in relationships. You're reacting in relationships according to this background sense of alarm that is reflecting younger parts of yourself, where you had separated, where you've abandoned yourself in service of approval of mom, dad, church, mother, father, preacher, teacher, caregivers, friends. And it, helps because the first half of life basically becomes this gigantic mistake where we think that we're in control, but these unconscious motives are controlling us until our wake-up call, whether it's a health crisis, a financial crisis, a relationship crisis. This is where people reach out to me and say, this is where I am. I'm like, great, let's go backwards and see why you were the perfect storm to take full responsibility to get you, not blame, but full responsibility to get you where you are now, so that we can start at base camp and then climb that mountain towards the holy grail of human existence, which is to feel safe in your body, to be able to look in the mirror and say, I love you, and actually mean it, and to be able to have relationships which are truthful, which you take off the mask and say, hey, this is who I am. I've actually gotten completion with all those shameful parts of myself that I don't want anybody to know about, that I've been trying so desperately to hide with all these masks and personas. I'm ready to actually speak using my voice, using a truth, and then actually heal myself, become my own medicine. So this is what I'm so passionate about. It makes my heart sing to teach people these tools, and it's all about getting into the body as well. Get out of your mindset. It's not a mindset issue. The thing I really want you to understand, I want you to get as far as anxiety goes. Please get this down. We have it all backwards. Your thoughts don't create your state. There are, I would say, maybe 20% of nerve endings of, oh, I'm having shitty thoughts, then I'm going to have shitty feelings. It actually works backwards. The state of your autonomic nervous system, whether you're in fight or flight or you're in a freeze response, goes up and will control and dictate the level of your thinking. So if you're trying to stop your thinking and ignoring the autonomic state in your body, you're wasting your time. It's kind of like you're having a little bit of a panic attack, and then I tell you, hey, JC, just chill the fuck out. JC, chill the fuck out. Don't be so, just calm down. That never works. Your work to become trigger proof is to show those parts of yourself, not tell, show those parts safety through self-regulation and internalized co-regulation.
You know, it's funny. Just imagine being friends with this guy before he figured all this out, because that's what our friendship was. And it's interesting to look back because we were both kind of moving at the same pace through our traumas and stuff like that, and we both helped each other quite a bit. But I remember we used to always support each other. Like when he would go out on stage in a total fear crisis, just like me, we would just tell each other, they're going to love you, man. They're going to love you. And we used to joke about the idea that like all that matters is that they love me. And from the outside in, people would look and say, oh, those selfish, agenda-ridden people. But you know what? Who doesn't want to be loved, right? So anyway, Nima, awesome. So obviously in the notes for the podcast, and I'll put the links in there and stuff, you know, give me just in like 2 minutes, what are some of the primary, because everybody's hearing this and it's rumbling up in them, but they're probably 10 minutes from now just going to go back to bullshitting and pretending. So what are the typical things that people that acknowledge and feel, and what's the first step? Because it might be scary, like, am I going to have to sit down with this guy in a classroom and have him like make me go inward? You know, like, so if somebody's kind of freaking out.
Yes, the answer to that question is yes, you will. Essentially, what you're asking, JC, is what's a good place to begin? And I actually did a workshop yesterday, and we went through this very exercise. And if you really want to start this process of self-regulation, you're in a relationship situation which isn't favorable, and you're wondering, should I stay? Should I go? I basically have a process that we take people through that really gets you firmly connected with your intuition, because your intuition knows. It's just we have a bunch of story and fear that's stopping us from connecting to it, right? So how do we get to that point where our intuition really knows? Well, what we do is we go towards those painful parts. And I'm going to invite you to ask yourself these 2 questions that are going to help you in this situation as cute little kids are running around and screaming in the lobby. It's cute. So the first question that I want you to ask, if you're really interested in getting to the root cause of the root cause, I'm talking, look, it's funny. People come with relationship issues and we're like, all right, let's ignore your partner and let's just go upstream. You want to go upstream? Grab your paddle. Let's go upstream and just ask yourself this one question. What was my main need that I felt wasn't met growing up as a child? And for me, it was I didn't feel seen and heard. I actually thought about this with you, JC, and the shared stuff that you shared with me about your father and stuff like that. And you probably are going to relate to this too, is, you know, having parents that are so kind of into their own thing and kind of trying to fit you into a mold, and dealing with their own anxieties and checked out because of their own dysregulation. I always tell people the greatest gift that you can give your children is a self-regulated, self-loving parent, because now you're not going to be using the children to fill a void. You actually can be appreciating the children and help fill their needs rather than use them to do the same. So my experience, my core need that I felt wasn't met was feeling seen and heard and validated. This is why what I teach is so important, not just personally, because not only do I get to feel seen and heard when I'm teaching, which addresses that core wound, but also that's that first part. The second flip side to this question that I want you to really start asking yourself is, what coping mechanisms did I accumulate to meet that need? And so, JC, you and I are very similar in this. We become really great at garnering attention. I mean, part of this show is the show that you've created, the show that I created, the transmissions that I do. Unconsciously, if we could be completely honest, it takes care of that younger part of me that loves to feel seen. I love when you said, hey, can you do an interview? I'm like, oh yes, absolutely. Another experience for my wounded inner child to feel seen. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just most of us are doing this unconsciously. And there's a way of integrating those parts of us that have those unmet needs and actually turn it into service and power and fulfillment and flow. But you got to be conscious of it. So that's the first part. The second part is, what is my compensating? What was the coping mechanism that I used? And the place to begin is your work moving forward, to be able to heal your anxiety, to transform your relationships, is to be able to take these extreme polarities of yourself, that wounded part and that winning formula coping mechanism that are at kind of that are from the same wound but are disintegrated, and the work is to bring those parts together, working together. Because if you don't, what happens is this polarity, you will attract somebody in a relationship with an equal polarity of a kind of an opposing part, and this is where codependency happens. And so when you can integrate those poles together, you're more authentic, the relationships around you become authentic, your health starts to transform, your energy shifts, and you then have an access to that inner voice and inner guidance, and then you can then move forward from the inside out rather than saying, what should I do? Tell me what, give me advice, and I don't know who I am and I don't know what to do. That healing work is possible through integrating those two.
I love it. I love it. I love it. He's got a Facebook group, Facebook, and he put it in it's for TRIGGERPROOF. If anybody wants to join that, you can find him at drnima.com. Is that the best website? Thumbs up. And he's just a great friend. And I have to say personally, he's changed quite a bit. And I'm sure he could say the same thing about me. The old version of the fake healthy version of him, right? We've all gone through this. Oh, I'm better now. I'm better now. He used to just perform and rap and dance. And I said to him, are you going to do one of your raps? And he goes, no, I don't really do that anymore. And I was just shocked. And I said, whoa, he's actually changing. So what that means is that everybody that engages with him now, you're getting the most healthy version of him yet. And what's funny is I look at the, I don't know if you can see, people are giving me emojis. You got a thumbs up, a heart, a laugh, and a sad face. I've never seen that before. You got all the emotions. So you took them on a roller coaster. So thanks so much for being here, my brother. Just as a reminder, I know that there's some people in the Clubhouse room. We've got another really big Clubhouse room about to open. So we're not going to jump in there. We're going to give Dragon a break, and then we're going to open up that other room. But do me a favor. First of all, subscribe to the podcast, Rise Up with Dragon, iTunes, Spotify, all the stuff. And if you like what you hear, leave me I love you. Right? You could even put that as your review.
Make sure you say JC, I love you.
That's it.
It's really important. It's really important to JC that you say that.
It would make me feel so good. And so Rise Up with Dragon podcast, all of this stuff will be on Instagram and all over the place so that you can all take turns loving us. But if you want, in the thread of this live, do me a favor and just everybody that is listening that gained from this, just tell Nima that you love him so that he can
it's important. Your approval means the world to me, and I really need to hear that from you. Thank you.
All right, my brother, we're going to go out with my outro, but I love and appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for being here.